small to medium-sized enterprises that sell software services, a large proportion of them feel it would be very difficult for their business to exist if it wasn't for the underlying public data that our partners provide. And this is a really interesting ecosystem to study, because what we find is that those companies probably wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the public data. And so in a recent survey, 76% of those SMEs that we surveyed said they couldn't offer their products or services if it wasn't for the data available in the public data.
Have you ever tried building a house without the right tools? It is possible, but so much harder than it needs to be. Now imagine small businesses with groundbreaking ideas but no access to the advanced tools and technology they need to succeed. This is where research and technology infrastructures, RTIs, step in. In this episode, we'll dive into how RTIs like Euro-BioImaging, Elixir, and ALBA Synchrotron are not just for elite institutions. They are supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, across various sectors. From mobile PET scanners in the fields to world-class physics labs, RTIs are offering flexible access and full support to businesses that need it the most. We'll also explore how orchestrators, including RTOs and alumni, play a crucial role in making these resources accessible, while ensuring sustainable funding and clear communication are at the forefront. Get ready to hear from Ed Mitchell, Claudia Pfander, Andy Smith, Nuria Valls, and our host Ricardo Miguez, who are passionate about bridging this gap and driving innovation forward. Let's explore how SMEs can thrive with the right support from RTIs.
Welcome everyone to the Insider Podcasts. And before we dive into the core of our discussion, let's start with something fun. Could each of you share a quirky or little-known fact about your institution that always brings a smile to your face? And while you're at it, if you can, tell us about the part of your work that you're most passionate about. So, Claudia, I'd like to start with you. What's the fun fact in Euro-BioImaging?
Fun fact in Euro-BioImaging. We have more than 200 facilities, but we don't just do microscopy in the lab. People might not know that we have, for example, underwater microscopy with microscopes installed on coral reefs in the Mediterranean. Or we have mobile PET scanners that people take actually out to the fields to look at their plants. And soon we might have our first imaging project in space. So we are already really everywhere, not just in Europe, but underwater and in space.
I think that answers the passionate part about, because that is really an answer where you can see that you're very, very passionate about what you do and about what Euro-BioImaging is and does. And we'll get deeper into that. Now, maybe Andy.
Hi, Ricardo. Thanks. So for Elixir, we've got 500 services, and everything we do is available online. So for most of those services, they're available for free. So users don't request access, they don't pay for access, and they can come from anywhere in the world, from industry or academia. So we're quite unusual to most other research infrastructures in that everything is available online for anyone at no cost. And the thing that really motivates me is how transnational and international Elixir is, and indeed most research infrastructures. So many different partners in different countries trying to support the needs of so many different countries in other different companies in other countries. So I think for me, it's definitely the international flavor that is the most inspiring part of it.
That's how we met, isn't it? Ed, let's go with you now in ESRF, Grenoble.
Well, we're international like everybody else. I think one of the important things about the ESRF is we've got 40 nationalities on our staff. We're only about 600 in total, but in there we've got 40 nationalities from across Europe and further afield. And I think in terms of sort of passion, it's again reflecting Andy from Elixir, where we have industry coming from across the world to use the facilities, and the passion is trying to match how they can use us. Getting industry to an academic facility is non-trivial. and it's great when we see something working.
Yeah, indeed, and that really tells about the passion that you have about your job as well. Nuria, you're from you're my neighbor in Spain, ALBA Synchrotron, an important infrastructure in physics and serving many other fields. What's the fun fact in ALBA?
Yeah, so ALBA is the Spanish synchrotron, and I like a funny story about the name, because many visitors, when they come here for the first time, they expect something very complicated. They think that the name it's an acronym of accelerator, light, and something very complicated, but that's not the case. So ALBA means sunrise. And here, this is how I like to start the conversations with companies, to say that, look, this is not...
This is a sunset, this is a sunrise, this is where your journey starts.
Exactly. And I like to explain them that synchrotron techniques may be very useful for the daily problems or challenges at companies that still in the Spanish ecosystem, that's not very well known. So I like to make this relationship between the ALBA name that seems very complicated, but it's something very nice and simple, and the same for the synchrotron tools that we can offer to the companies.
Very good. So to go deeper and set the stage for the rest of the conversation, I'd like to start by discussing the importance of research and technology infrastructures, or RTIs. And this is a concept that we have decided to bring together in our event. Of course, it was already being discussed before the event for a long time and in many other fora. But bringing together research and technology infrastructures in itself is a step that hasn't been given before. It's a kind of a continuum of the research and innovation value chain. And in Europe, this is very important, especially for SMEs. So I would like to get back to Ed at the ESRF and start by sharing how ESRF has supported SMEs through its research infrastructure, or is it a technology infrastructure? Perhaps with an example that highlights how you impact through the SMEs?
Yeah, I mean, there's this ongoing debate, right? RIs versus TIs, and they're in the same space. And I think probably most of the facilities that we've got with us today, they're probably both RI and TI to some extent. And I think that's a fascinating development of RIs in the future as we move to be supporting more industry and developing standards, quality controls, approaches that make us more like a TI and being able to respond better to industrial needs because we're matching their world, right? And it's tailoring our facilities to match industry, not the other way around, right? Not tailoring industry to work with an RI, but tailoring the RI. I think at the ESRF, we're producing very high performance analytical services. So we go far beyond traditional lab methods. So we can do very high resolution, very high spatial resolution analysis of materials. Examples include things like, easy to grasp example is tomography. So you go to a hospital and get a CT. It's relatively low resolution and low contrast. Whereas at the ESRF, we are easily heading towards tens of nanometers. Microns is trivial for doing tomography. In terms of SMEs, this can help. For example, we had a company called Force with us who looked at additive manufacturing, and they wanted to look for faults in certain samples that we can't mention where they came from, but they're looking at additive manufactured samples, looking at defects within the object. And these are typically dense materials made out of metal. The X-rays from the synchrotron rip through, very high resolution, they can look at defects. And with the revolution now in synchrotrons in the last few years, as we've upgraded and gone to what are called the fourth generation facilities, ESRF is the first high energy one of those in the world. Suddenly, instead of doing 1 or 2 scans on these objects, we can scan libraries of objects, 100, 1,000 objects, and you can start looking at statistical information. So that really is a leap forward in how we can work with industry. And we're just, even now, just trying to get the word out about that and seeing what the potential is in working with industry.
I'm going to want to go deeper into that, Ed, because I'm not, it's quite interesting what you said that, what basically you were saying that in the beginning of your answer that RIs are increasingly answering the needs of SMEs, but not all RIs are doing that, and ESRF is particularly tailored from the beginning, perhaps, to do that. Would you agree with that, or do you think there was a transformation? Of course, I'm not talking about an evolving capacity. I'm talking about a transformation, a real transformation from an RI into something else.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I feel when I arrived at the ESRF a million years ago, we weren't ready, not really, to work with industry. There has been a transformation. The stakeholders expect it. Expect much more engagement with industry, and I think there's a transformation in the way internally we think, how we provide services to industry, how we go out and teach, educate, communicate, reach out about what we can do at the synchrotron, and not just the ESRF, it's all the other synchrotrons across Europe and the world as well, playing the same game in reaching out and working with industry. There is a transformation. Most recently, for example, we worked with BASF, big German chemical company, everyone knows them, who approached us with a specific problem. We designed a specific service for them. That's actually resulted in a spin-off from BASF called Momentum Transfer, who provide an A to Z service using powder diffraction of the ESRF. But that was initiated by a specific request from BASF, where we tailored a service for what they needed to do. And that's quite a remarkable transformation in going back 10 years. That's probably not something that we would have tried to do.
No, that is remarkable. It's very, very, very interesting. I'm assuming that we'll get to that part of the conversation where we have a lot of skills, an evolving skill set within the infrastructure as well. But you've said that is transversal to infrastructures across Europe, and especially synchrotrons. Do you agree, Nuria, and everybody else? But Nuria, do you agree with that?
Yes, sure. I fully agree, and I also have seen this maybe smaller, but also transformation at ALBA Synchrotron since I started working here with companies. So now also our stakeholders are asking more and more interactions with industries at national level, but also at European level. So we have to really foster these collaborations, interaction, connection with industry. And yes, at ALBA, we are also changing the way how we work with companies, and specifically with SMEs that are challenging.
So we can say that research and technology infrastructures are crucial for SMEs. But how is that? Let's give specific examples, and let's go to, for example, biotech. So Claudia, Euro-BioImaging is a really important infrastructure, is a cornerstone infrastructure nowadays for many SMEs, especially in biotech. Can you elaborate how your institution supports SMEs and their competitiveness, particularly in the life sciences? But of course, if it's broader than that, just correct me. But how does Euro-BioImaging do that? It was. I remember when I was in ESRI, it was not the core of Euro-BioImaging.
Well, if you give this example of biotech there, you have a lot of early stage R&D projects that are very diverse and that require a lot of different approaches and technologies in the proof of concept phase and in early validation also of an experimental design and the concept. And in particular, imaging requires really large investments into equipment and into personnel that is very specifically trained. And by accessing imaging technologies through Euro-BioImaging, SMEs can choose from this huge portfolio of really the most advanced technologies and get full support from the experts throughout the project very early on. The SMEs can access the imaging capabilities almost immediately. They don't have to recruit the right staff. They don't have to make expensive investments into instruments. And then they can quickly reach decision points of whether to move a project forward or then continue investing in their own instruments and processes. And I think that's very crucial for the competitiveness to have these early milestones, and their research infrastructures can support by chipping in with the personnel, with the human capital, so to speak, and offloading some of the burden of the SMEs for these investments.
So again, we go back to an evolving set of skills that these infrastructures have been collecting and capacities to provide these services. But it's not only about skills, it's also about, depending on what the infrastructure does, for example, in Elixir, which is a fabulous endeavor and initiative that I have known for many, many years and had the privilege of being there when the previous director was hired, Nicholas. So in Elixir, Andrew, how do you do that? Because what you deal with is large-scale biological data, right? So what advantages does Elixir offer to SMEs? What can an SME working in the biosector expect to find in Elixir, and how can it take advantage of it? Does it? What's my main curiosity here is, how do you feel this weighs on the company?
Yeah, so there's a lot of publicly available data that comes from research projects, nationally funded research projects, or EU research projects, and that could be genomics data, proteomics, metabolomics, it could be image data. So across the life sciences, we've got huge volumes of really useful data being generated. And what we need to do is make sure that they are integrated and can be reused by industry and academia. So what we do in Elixir is our partners provide data-related services, as well as software and data management support, so that companies can gain value from that publicly available data. So that could be a pharmaceutical company that's trying to develop a new vaccine, or it could be an agrochemical company that wants to develop a new drought-tolerant crop, and they may need to look at the underlying genomic basis of the species that they're looking at. They may need to compare different types of data sets. They need to make sure that the data are standardized. So our partners support them with that by making their high-quality services available. And I would say that there are two prerequisites for research infrastructure to be able to provide effective industry support. And this comes back to one of your earlier points, Ricardo, about how across the landscape we're seeing more and more research infrastructures recognizing the importance of supporting industry. I think firstly, you need to have a strong mandate from your funders, because you then need to make resource available. That could be through dedicated services, or it could be time to understand the needs of industry. And that's the second part, which Ed described in his response as well. You really do have to have high quality services to be able to partner in the long term with industry, because they might be able to buy this solution somewhere else. And if your service isn't high enough quality, it won't be used. So you need a strong mandate from your funders, and you need to then have the capacity in-house to work with those industry to make sure that the services that you develop are fit for purpose. And in the case of Elixir, because we've got so many open resources, a lot of what we are doing is matchmaking, connecting, brokering, increasing the visibility of these services, and trying to help our partners in their national nodes to reach out to local companies in those areas. Because the potential users in industry, biotech, there are small to medium-sized enterprises across Europe. It's the IT sector, it's pharmaceuticals. So there's a lot of companies that are very active users of this data. And we've got a large industry portfolio managed by a dedicated program manager for innovation and impact, which we've been able to develop for a number of years.
So, Andrew, stop you there just to actually, again, emphasize that this is an evolving process. Right, this has been something that Elixir has been investing in hugely. It is an enormous effort, and it is a skill set that is developed a long time. It's not just something that appears, because that's my main issue. It's with the capacity, the sensibility to be able to interact, to reach out, to understand, to dialogue with the companies. And it's not all the types of companies that are capable of resorting to this type of services. Even in your areas, which are niche areas, well, in your case, I mean, you serve quite a lot of different sectors, I would assume. But in any case, it's not all the SMEs that are capable of reaching out. So, how do we ensure that the services that research and technology infrastructures provide are beneficial to SMEs, and we can actually broaden the number of SMEs in Europe that take advantage of the infrastructures that exist at the moment? And this is a question for any of you, but I would like to continue with Andy for now, and then hear the rest of you.
Yeah. So in the case of Elixir, it's important to invest in outreach. I think that's crucial. There are lots of companies out there that probably could be benefiting from the services that our partners provide, but won't necessarily know about it. Maybe they're a micro SME, and so they need to access public data, but they don't know which resource to use. They don't know where it sits. They're not an expert in data management. So there'll definitely be some companies out there that could potentially benefit who wouldn't necessarily know about it. So visibility, communications, and outreach, that's definitely important. That's also important because it helps you to understand the needs of those companies, and that information can be fed back to the database providers as well, so that they have, for example, a help desk, or maybe they've got people that can answer the questions and understand the needs of those companies. So for me, in the case of Elixir, the key is really about effective outreach and working with different partners to share that information as well. So for a while, we've had an industry program which has been managed by a dedicated manager in the Elixir Hub. But obviously that doesn't scale, because sometimes a company might want in Spain might want to access a service that's run by a partner in Switzerland. And so it's the Swiss partner that understands what data is in that resource and how it can be used best. And so a lot of it is matchmaking and putting companies in contact as well. And of course, this takes time and resource, but I think that for the case of Elixir, it's definitely really about networking, collaboration, building. That is the success here.
Yeah. And what about your in Euro-BioImaging, Claudia? What you have to add about that, and what would be the main ways in which Euro-BioImaging helps the SMEs, and the main ways in which it gets this feedback and serves better and better the SMEs?
Yeah, I want to pick up on what Andy mentioned, of that you need the resources really to have this dialogue, and often at the research infrastructure, you're not set up. You don't have a huge team of business developers and people who can do that type of outreach. So it's very important that you talk to the right people, that you find the sort of mediators that can also help you get this knowledge from an industry sector. And we started talking, for example, a lot with the national and regional clusters, to Biotech networks locally, because that's also what they found, that of course we are a distributed research infrastructure in Europe, and it's all about transnational access across Europe, but a lot of SMEs also want support locally. They want to quickly go sit at the microscope, do something with a very low barrier of access. So we have to also set up these local ecosystems where they integrate research infrastructure services into their research pipeline. And we find that works really well as we approach people who also know the landscape a little bit, who have maybe watched companies develop and grow and have this insight, and talking to Biotech clusters is really helpful. Also in the European Commission, you find these roles. For example, if you look at the program offices of the European Innovation, they have portfolios that are clustered around a topic, and they know their partners and their grantees very well. And these are the type of people to talk to that can very quickly give you insight into a certain sector.
Okay, well, let's assume I'm an SME and I don't have a clue about how can you help me. But a friend came and told me, you should look at that website. Now, what do I do? What do I do? How do I get there? How do I know, for example, that it's not the node in the UK, and I'm an SME in the UK. It's not the node in the UK that is useful to me. It's the Swiss node or the Portuguese node, or because actually in Elixir there is a Portuguese node. So what's how does that work? Like the simple mechanics of that. Let's try to make that clear for our listeners, because not everybody knows. And I think that's one of our problems, and it's part of the outreach and the engagement. Not everybody knows how this works. We speak in our own lingo in research and technology infrastructures for some time, and we need to make this very, very clear. So I'm an SME. I work in Biotech, and I'm actually a little startup. It's me and two other guys that had an idea during our postdocs, and we decided to make a company. So what's how does it work?
Maybe I can give an example from Elixir here. So you mentioned Portugal, so that's a nice example, Ricardo. So obviously in Elixir, different countries build up their capacity in different aspects of life sciences. And in Portugal, the genome of the oak tree is very important to the economy. Mm-hmm. It's important for the wine industry as well. And so there's lots of expertise in genome annotation around different grape species and the genome of the cork oak tree. So you could have a company in Italy that needs to get expertise from Portugal, or you could have a Portuguese company. So we try to have a joint approach here because everything is available openly. So the expertise on this topic sits in Portugal, and they will do local and regional outreach events where they will partner with industry associations to try and show them about the resources that they've got. And then at the European level, we will be aware of that expertise, and we might have another meeting or contact with a different company who we know would use that service, and we would try to broker them and put them in touch as well. So that's how we try to make it work in practice. But it does rely on a lot of outreach and networking and public events to make this happen. We have 500 services, and navigating those services for beginners is a challenge. So we always need to think about what's the best way of streamlining access or making it easy for people to find the services that they want. So advanced users usually know what they need and go straight there. Those that don't need a little bit of hand-holding and often they don't know what service they need. So it requires conversations with them to try and understand the research problem before they can be directed to the relevant node or database that they are looking for. So I think both approaches are really needed here.
These are examples that Claudia and Andy have been describing for distributed research infrastructures. But for example, for single-sited infrastructures like the ALBA Synchrotron, how does it work? What kind of entities do you have coming to you, and how do you feel that are the key activities that you need to develop and the key skills that you need to bring on board to be able to serve SMEs?
Yeah, well, first we have a lot of similarities with what Claudia and Andy mentioned. So first, visibility, outreach, so awareness. Still, many companies, Spanish companies, do not know what they can do at ALBA Synchrotron. So this is one of our main activities. So to explain them what they can do, but with a language that they can understand. So not academic results. So we don't need to show academic results, but more industry-oriented results. So that's very important to show them what competitors are doing, for example, what can they do with their samples at ALBA. And this is one thing. And then once a company is convinced that they want to try one of our techniques, good service, it's very important, and oriented service. So companies want to have answers to their challenges. And that's very important. And for this, we need also to educate our staff, our scientists that are doing the industrial services, that's also very important, because that's sometimes the results that companies need are different from the academic ones. So, and that's very important. So we need also education, internal education. And the role of the industrial office, it's very important here to drive all these conversations.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack, and we're getting a little bit away from our script. But I think it's very important, because you've touched upon very important things that would deserve a podcast in themselves, like how to communicate. Right, all of you have touched upon that. Ed is a master in that area; he has many years of experience in that. And you talk about industrial liaison, but one of the things that you've spoken about that I would like to bridge with is that you said, not all the companies in Spain know that they can, all the relevant companies in Spain know that they can come to ALBA and actually benefit from our services. That brings me to the notion of ecosystem. For example, in ESRF is inbuilt in a very, very strong ecosystem, right? So I would like to explore that a little bit. What's the importance of that ecosystem and the interface of ESRF with other infrastructures that have different focus, different levels of maturity, and different capacities, and even different serve different types of academic communities and industries, and at the same time, how does that ecosystem helps and attracts the SMEs? And would you like to comment on that, Ed?
Was that to me?
Yes, Ed.
Yep. That's a difficult one, right? Because, I mean, as you've said, we're a single-sited RI, so we're international with around 20 countries supporting us. We try to respond to all the countries as best we can, but we are naturally embedded in a local ecosystem down in Grenoble, where nanotech electronics is very prevalent. We're a partner in the local Research Technology Institute on nanoelectronics, and that helps us link across to companies like Soitec, ST Microelectronics, and others. But we're also on a site with neutrons. We have 2 international RIs here, which provide complementarity between neutrons and X-rays. So the neutrons can see things in materials that we can't see, and vice versa. And that complementarity is important when we're working with industry as well. I think we could probably do better there than we do at the moment. I think it's important in these ecosystems that we make use, and everybody's alluded to it, right? The intermediaries, because as a facility in France, in industry, ESRF, no one knows who we are, not really. However, the CEA, the CNRS, Grenoble University, people know what they are. There's also a lot of trust in those networks. So bridging out to the real world through as many multipliers as we can reasonably do, and directly as the ESRF, is incredibly valuable. I think that's the model that we're working on much, much more now, in using professional intermediaries, these little companies that have sprung up in the spaces between the facilities and the ecosystems, whether they're local, national, or international levels. Also making use of RTOs, right, with those trusted networks. We have an important arrangement with Fraunhofer in Germany at the moment, where they have invested in one of our beamlines. They bring with them their network of industrials from Germany, and they're using some of they have a privileged access to tomography on one of our beamlines, which is great. We wouldn't be able to do that as the ESRF in Germany, but the Fraunhofer, with their reputation, trust, and visibility, can do that. And that's important. I don't think, my feeling is that the ESRF or any facility on its own is going to find it incredibly hard work to go out and engage with industry, right? We can't do it. Engaging with 100,000 SMEs across Europe, we can't do that. But with intermediaries, whether RTOs, specialist companies, the EIC, right? I think both Euro-BioImaging and ESRF, we're partners to the EIC. We're exploring that method as well to reach out, especially to SMEs. And we actually had our first hit with a company based in Portugal, as it happens, by chance, who's reached out to us as an EIC partner to see whether we can support them in some catalyst research. So the first step in that EIC process is that we'll have an informal chat, science tech, with the company concerned to see whether we can help them. That exploration step, if we can, then we'll go to the next step and maybe provide some access in exploring their catalyst for them in oxidation, say, whatever it might be.
I think you've just hit the nail on the head, and what is one of my main reasonings about how this system should be working in the future and how we should envision it, even at the policy level, which is the relation between different types of infrastructures, the relation between different types of institutions that host infrastructures, and the relation between different types of institutions that have different skill sets and different accesses to the industry and SMEs in general. Because we've been talking about so far, if we're honest with each other here, about we're accessing SMEs, but each one of our research infrastructures is accessing a very small number of SMEs in the universe of SMEs available. So these orchestrators, these interface organizations that have a orientation to and a skill set and the capacity, and sometimes are also hosts of research and technology infrastructures, like the Elixir node is hosted by ENESC in Lisbon. Or at least ENESC is an important partner of that node, and helped creating it. But we also participate in the European in EMSO and other big research infrastructure, distributed research infrastructures, and we are an RTO. Right. For all, what distinguishes us is that we are an RTO. We are at the interface of academia and industry. We work more than half of our staff is from universities, and some of the best universities and polytechnics in Portugal. And then we have this capacity of a lot of business developers and people that cut across scientific areas and deal with industry and talk to industry every single day in order to understand their needs and try to develop the best solutions for them. And sometimes the best solutions are in-house. In the majority of cases, they are, but many times what we need to do is to say, look, your solution and what we can offer is also access to a research infrastructure in France, in the UK, in Spain, in Denmark, wherever. It doesn't really matter, right? So all of this connection between SMEs and this continuum is something that needs to be thought out from the beginning in the next set of framework program policies. And so going a step back and talking about orchestrators, because I think that's a really important part of the conversation, what would you say are the best practices for orchestrators in improving the SME access to RTIs across different sectors? And by the way, what is an orchestrator? Would any of you like to give any examples? Because orchestrators might mean different things for all of us. So you've spoken about companies. I have spoken with individuals. Right. So what is an orchestrator, and how does that orchestrator can benefit your infrastructures? Any of you?
Could be anything, right? I mean, that's the wonderful nature of what we're trying to do with engaging with industry. It could be an RTO, it could be an alumni, right? Some of the most powerful orchestrators or ambassadors are alumni, right? The PhDs, the postdocs that have gone out to the real world to industry. They know us. They turn into an influential person in the industry and they say, oh, but I could go back to Elixir or the ESRF or ALBA or Euro-BioImaging or where it might be because I know about it and I know they have commercial access. But it also, I mean, especially powerful, though, are the intermediary companies, the specialized scientific companies, at least in the world with synchrotrons, who know us and build the bridges with industry, usually at a national level, but also can beyond that. I think that network is incredibly valuable. I think one of the things that we have to be wary of is that we're often, a slightly different topic, but it's relevant, is that we're often asked, but industry should be paying their fair share to keep the RIs, the TIs operating. Right? I feel that industry shouldn't be seen as some kind of honeypot where suddenly vast percentages of an RI's operational costs are going to be supported. And I think, clearly in the case of SMEs who are cash-strapped, time-strapped, and support-strapped, that they are going to be requiring sustainable support from the RIs or from funding stakeholders in order to really engage with us. And this sort of magical honeypot of support coming from industry facilities, I don't think that exists. I think that's a little bit of a pipe dream. There is some money there, but there's not going to be 50% funding of an RI is not going to come from industry. At least I don't believe that.
Well, that's a different issue that we can go into. And it's quite interesting because that's the funding model. and the funding model, I have seen, for example, some infrastructures at universities that have 80% of the revenue coming from industry, right? Like in nanomaterials, it's in clean rooms. It's actually
clean
quite
room
common.
is a TI. Clean room is a TI, right? You know that.
Now you're distinguishing.
I am, right? Because TI's role of the CEA's budget is expected to be, I think, something like 50% from industry, right? That's their role as an RTO. But as an RI,
okay. So
some of our beamlines have funding at very high levels from industry, but it's a specific individual beamline, not the facility. I'd be quiet.
Absolutely, but that's actually a very important point. So by the way, the funding, the typical funding model or the reference funding model for an RTO is 30-30-30, right? It's 30% industry, 30% the public funding, and 30% competitive, usually European competitive money. So that's the typical funding model for an RTO. But there are differences and there are changes, and what the difference that you just touched upon is the one that actually justifies and actually demands the networking, the closer connection, the interconnection between different types of infrastructures and different types of institutions. Claudia, what do you have to add to that? You were raising your hand.
I was raising my hand. Two different points I have to make. I mean, one is touching upon the with the funding model. For Euro-BioImaging, access is not free, so users have to pay a fee, which is in the case of industry still competitive, but they have to pay for access. But there are, of course, various funding schemes to cover that. For example, with the European Commission's dedicated funding program for TNA access. But I think it's important that RI services can be much better integrated into different funding schemes and combined with funding that SMEs might already be receiving, not just from the European Commission, but also from nationally industry programs that are operating there, and how to make RTI services really flexible enough that they can be integrated there and combined. That's very important. So both in terms of eligibility, but also how flexible the process is, how admin heavy, what are the timelines? Is it really feasible to integrate it with other funding streams? And I think that's very important. The other point was towards the combining or uniting with the different RTIs. So in the context of these CC programs, the different research and technology infrastructures are already put together. For example, the life science survey research infrastructures work together in projects such as cancer or by COVID, looking at infectious diseases or cancer research topics, and then can combine both their outreach but also their service offer to SMEs and thereby learning from each other, but also making the service offer to companies much more attractive and fitting to them.
I think it's fair to say that there are some sectoral specificities here. The biotech, health, medtech, etc. sector is a very dynamic one, and it's probably one where we can see a lot of these cases emerging that we just described. But for example, in ALBA, I mean, how would you describe the type of services that ALBA provides in terms of the target sectors, and how do you find yourself in this ecosystem articulation with other entities? What do you take out from there? How do you see that in Spain and in ALBA in particular?
So at ALBA, our main sectors where we are provided services is pharmaceutical, as I would say most of the synchrotrons, but also cosmetics and construction, and I would say that these are and batteries. These are the main sectors that now the company where we are now offering services to companies. But here we have to also differentiate big companies and SMEs. So SMEs, the type of experiments, projects that we are offering to SMEs are smaller and are shorter in time. So, and for this, I think that we have to focus on that type of experiments and to engage for longer collaborations with SMEs, because I'm sure that they would like to, but sometimes
that's also a very important part, isn't it, Nuria, and everyone else? It's the type of service. We're talking about services as if they're all the same. But they're not all the same. One thing is to access a beamline for a major experiment. Another thing is to access a set of data and just consult the set of data and go away, right? And the completely different thing is to have a mobile PET scanner that goes around that Euro-BioImaging provides, and then you might have a whole team going with it for weeks and weeks. So I mean, the type of services are hugely different. So how would you characterize, for example, I mean, I'd like to hear all of you, but let me get back to Andy now, for example. How would you characterize the type of services that Elixir provides?
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the very beginning, almost all of our services are available for free. And there's a reason for that. That's because the resources that our partners provide are non-exhaustible. So anyone in the world can access the data or the software, and it's available, and there's no additional cost to the research infrastructure operator for supporting those users. It's different for high performance computing. So access to a supercomputer, which is depletable. There is an access process, because that resource, if it's given to one organization or company, can't be given to another one. But everything is available openly. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is understand the needs of different industry sectors and then support them in using the relevant services. And to give a really interesting example of what we're looking at in Elixir, there's a very healthy ecosystem of small to medium-sized enterprises that are very active in doing bioinformatics. And we've been studying those over the last few years. What they are doing is providing software. They're developing software services themselves, which they sell on to other companies, usually pharma. And so what they will do, they will take public data, they will bring that in-house, they will develop software on top, and then they will try to mix that with proprietary data from their pharmaceutical clients. So in a way, they're selling services on top of the public data. And this is a really interesting ecosystem to study, because what we find is that those companies probably wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the public data. And so in a recent survey, 76% of those SMEs that we surveyed said that they couldn't offer their products or services if it wasn't for the data available.
76%. That's an amazing number. Huh?
So, obviously, a pharmaceutical company, okay, it has its own resources and it would still develop its drugs and vaccines without open data, but it would cost more, it would take longer, it would be more complex. But for these small to medium-sized enterprises that sell software services, a large proportion of them feel it would be very difficult for their business to exist if it wasn't for the underlying public data that our partners provide. And so for us, that's really interesting to explore. And I agree with Ed's point earlier when he was talking about the role of alumni in helping to raise visibility. So what we see here, a lot of these small to medium-sized enterprises that are developing software, the staff, their bioinformaticians, their software developers may have been working in the research infrastructure before they've gone and set up their own company. And equally, we have staff that have worked in companies that have left and joined the research infrastructure. And so if you track this across Europe, you see that there are hotspots of small to medium-sized enterprises in Barcelona, in Switzerland, in Berlin, London, Cambridge, Oxford. And actually at the same time, you see a lot of the public resources in Elixir are developed from those places. And that's usually the availability of highly trained and skilled staff as well. And I think that's a really interesting area, which is definitely true of Elixir, and I could imagine being true of many other infrastructures as well.
No, that's for sure. I mean, I personally know the person who actually promoted the Elixir node in Portugal. Now has a very, very important company in the biotech area in Lisbon, and just received a very relevant EIC grant. So that's the network, that's the alumni that happens with infrastructures, happens with everything else. That's extremely important. Yes, Claudia?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on that point, because what we really should not underestimate here is also the knowledge transfer that happens from
Indeed.
RTIs to companies, to researchers in academia, and the really contribution that RTIs make also in training people at companies, and through the consultancy services that we offer. We really, because the RIs, they see so many different projects and they have interactions with so many different users, that they have an expertise that I think is unparalleled anywhere else, and they can cross projects pass on that knowledge. And somebody who interacts extensively with in a project with an RI, they can take home some of these skills, and that's not just technical skills, but also a knowledge on, for example, data standards and how to, what Andy mentioned, how to access the right repositories. And that's knowledge that stays with these people and then enables them later to maybe also do other projects on their own without necessarily consulting to an RTI. But that contribution that we make here to increasing the competencies and the skill set of people, that really not to be underestimated.
It's crucial, isn't it? It's crucial. I mean, I have that experience at Inesc. We're an RTO that hosts many technology infrastructures in many sectors, and some research infrastructures that are, for example, in the ESRI roadmap. And we feel sometimes as an incubator of talent that puts people into the market, and that is extremely important as a public good. It's just a mission that we have. So we agree that the funding is absolutely crucial from the public side, but also combined with the industry side, without seeing the industry as a golden pot, like Ed said. And we agree as well, I think, that we are working in an integrated ecosystem, and that we have to work with each other. That these orchestrator roles that you're talking about, independently of us having spoken about these individuals and the alumni, which are crucial, of course, but the relation between different type of infrastructures and different type of entities is absolutely crucial to reach out and to complement and to avoid duplication and to actually be creative and interdisciplinary to see where creativity and novelty comes up. So I would like to turn the conversation to policy, and how does all of this fits into the policy and coordination strategies at multi-level, but of course with a focus on the European research and innovation policy at the moment. So, for example, challenging Claudia there, would you foresee Euro-BioImaging services better aligned with the current national health innovation strategies to support SMEs? What challenges do you see, and how do you see that interacting with European level as well?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, Euro-BioImaging has really been steadily growing our user base through these dedicated TNA funding programs for RIs and that outreach in the academic community. But I think for better visibility of the services for SMEs and companies, we really have to be much more visible and much better integrated to other funding programs, such as the Innovative Health Initiative or the European Innovation Council, and also aligned with national programs for industry. That would be really crucial. But besides the technical services that we offer, I mean, RTIs also play very important roles in setting standards in the field, as Andy mentioned. So we are also active in a lot of data initiatives in the European health data space to really define imaging data standards and making, for example, medical images more accessible to the community and to companies. And it's really important that RTIs are seen as an important player here by the European Commission and invited to the table when these initiatives are set up to discuss, because I think they have so much to contribute here. They have really a lot of knowledge, and they then bring this knowledge back to SMEs and also help them with compliance, for example, when we talk about the data
Claudia,
space.
let's get this more concrete. What does this mean in terms of the current European policy, for example? Let's leave the national part aside for the moment. We have a research infrastructures funding program, and we have transnational access funding programs. And now we have this emergence, more than likely emergence, almost certain emergence, of a program for technology infrastructures. How do you foresee the role of the European level of instruments, support instruments and programs, and where would the infrastructures be located in that, the support to infrastructures be located in that? Let's think a little bit ahead. I've heard a lot about, for example, the infrastructures, and we discussed this in our event in June. Infrastructures should actually be not be in a pillar, be transversal to all pillars. Exactly because of what you just mentioned, Claudia, but exactly because of what we have discussed. This is so transversal. So, for example, Andy, how do you see that, and how would you, if you were the owner of the FP, how would you design it for infrastructures?
Yeah, it's a really timely question, Ricardo, given where we are on the thinking for FP10 and future programs of Horizon Europe as well. So we've been thinking about this a lot on Elixir, and our position paper on FP10 will be coming out this week, in fact. So I think that what's really important is that the budget available for research infrastructures really reflects the contribution that we collectively make on science and society, and that includes through our industry support as well. And I think most research infrastructures would recognize that sometimes the research infrastructure program has been squeezed in relation to some of the other more visible programs like ERC, Marie Curie, and certainly that's my view. And I think the best way of addressing that is making sure that we can demonstrate good examples of what has been enabled through the projects that we've been involved in, and explaining and showing examples of how industry benefits from our services. And
Andy,
therefore,
allow me to just stop you there for a second. You know me for many years. You know I'm a huge fan and defender of research infrastructures and technology infrastructures, and infrastructures in general that support research and innovation. Now, aren't these infrastructures also crucial for EIC type of projects? Aren't these infrastructures also crucial for collaborative projects? Aren't these infrastructures crucial for the tech transfer and the knowledge valorization that is taking place under the partnerships, etc., right? So, I mean, is dramatically increasing the budget of research infrastructures, which I would love, but let's be realistic. I mean, if we think like that for every single area of the program, we're not gonna need 200 billion. We're gonna need more than $1 trillion. So, is that going to solve the issue?
Yeah, so I think the overall budget is important as well, because what we've got to recognise is that there's a proliferation of research infrastructures that have been established, and those mature ones do need to be able to provide access to industry. So I think there is an interesting question where the budgets set aside by member states to support research infrastructures hasn't increased at the same rate that the European level budget has increased. And so that needs to be addressed somehow. Either that's through the research infrastructure program, or that's through member states themselves having a national roadmap and then dedicating budget to it. So either of those are ways of managing that. But I also agree with your point about trying to think of ways of ensuring that research infrastructures are better adopted by the other thematic parts of currently Horizon Europe and in future FP10 as well. And that's entirely true. If we think about, say, the current missions on cancer, well, if you're a research consortia that is trying to understand cancer, They might be getting medical images from Euro-BioImaging. They might be looking at data interoperability through Elixir or accessing cohorts through BBMRI. So there's definitely a role that can be played there and better linkages. And I think the Commission itself can do more when it comes to the inter-service consultation on the work programs to ensure that if new initiatives are being developed elsewhere, we look first to try and see what expertise the existing research infrastructures have rather than defaulting to creating new entities. So
No,
I think
absolutely.
that's an important...
Maybe to jump in here, I think that's really important, because in our case where the users has to pay for access and we have this transnational access funding programs, it's maybe not a common knowledge among people looking for a grant that these costs for accessing research infrastructures in the European grants, they are eligible costs. And so in a way, they are already present or could already be present in other funding streams if they were integrated into a proposal. And I think here also the Commission could do more to incentivize inclusion of RTIs in the research proposal. And as Andy said, looking at highlighting services that are already in existence rather than reinventing the wheel. And that would be just very important. I'm also thinking of the consultancy capacities here, but the Commission, for example, the national contact points, that they could be much more aware of the research and technology offer at RTIs,
Claudia,
and advise grantees to integrate.
I think the national contact points are fairly powerless to influence the structure of the programs and instruments in their national constituency, but they can inform much better, as you say, about the availability. In Portugal, actually, our national contact point does an excellent job in informing, I think. But I would like to actually hear about from Nuria and Ed, what would they consider would be the key elements of a successful policy framework for enhancing SME access? And let's get back to the SME access to RTIs focus of our conversation. That was the topic of our event in June. So, I'm not asking you to design a full program now in 2 minutes, but what comes to your mind as the most important in the design of a successful policy framework that can enhance SME access to RTIs? Nuria.
Yeah, if I may start, so from the experience that we have with previous programs, from European projects that we have implemented specific programs for SMEs to have access to synchrotrons. Here, what we have learned is that having funds, free access or subsidized access for doing a first project, a first service, a first interaction with, in that case, with synchrotrons, has been very, very useful to engage for the first time new companies, new SMEs. This has been, I think, very, very successful. And some of the key points to make this successful was that we have a single entry point for all the synchrotrons, most of the synchrotrons in Europe. So single entry point, easy process for the companies. That's very important. Support from the ICOs, VDOs. Companies need support from all of us to make the proposal and to have this access.
Nuria, please say what is the ICOs, because I'm sure that many of the people listening will not know.
ICOs, the industrial contact officers at synchrotrons, or VDO, business development officers, technological transfer officers, we can call as you wish, but the contact points and the research RTIs with the companies, and that we have, I think, a very relevant role. So easy process, fast process, flexibility, as also Claudia was mentioning, this transnational access that some of the European projects required. At least from my experience, I have seen that it can be a barrier for the companies. So that's also something important to take into account. So I would say these are the main points that I learned from the previous programs.
And Ed, what would you say is the best practice that for enhancing, in terms of policy, of course, enhancing SME access for our infrastructures?
One thing that worries me actually as a not to do is not to have an ambition to put in some kind of polyvalent, monolithic access portal covering all RIs, which sounds like a nightmare to maintain and update. And Nuria pointed out we've got like a single access.
We've tried that with Mariel, haven't we?
Well, I
Many years
wasn't
ago.
going to mention any particular names or anything like that, right?
Well,
I think
true.
I think in the context of the light source, I think an approach by area is appropriate. As Nuria already mentioned, the single access approach with a very easy page we've got for the light sources thanks to some transnational access approach. Transnational access needs to be rethought. I'd love to have portfolio managers funded by Europe who can go out knowledgeable about pharma, knowledgeable about materials, knowledgeable about energy, catalysts, whatever, who can go out and talk, network, build one-to-one discussions, go out to business fora, go out and do brokerage events, go out and be visible on electronic social media. We need those kinds of people to go and make contact with the SMEs. They need to build the trust, the visibility, the access. We're not going to suddenly get 50,000 accesses. I'll be delighted if we had 200 SMEs using the light sources over a couple of years. Already the Nuria and the team at ALBA and elsewhere have built up, I think, 50 accesses over the last couple of years, which is, I find that amazing. I think, but that builds us a foundation to build on for the future. It should be subsidized 100%. Stop faffing around with minuscule numbers as well. Sometimes we need to build software. We need to build sample environments. The moment the work we've been doing, we've had like maybe a couple of K per access available. That doesn't cover very much. We need to go far beyond that and build that as a much, much bigger and broader program with the portfolio managers, fully subsidized access, and don't expect there to be some kind of profit or benefit to the running cost of the facilities. Don't expect necessarily the SME to have a repeat business that goes on ad infinitum with the facility, because maybe with one access we've solved the problem, right? We've looked at the defect in the object or we've checked out what they're doing and it's done. And it's so much feedback we get saying, well, did they come back and do more work? Well, no, because we've done it and it's fixed. So I think there's a management of expectations at the stakeholder level as well about how we work with SMEs and the kind of problems we solve. It would be great to see if we're going to about specifics, a call that says, why don't we do a large-scale pilot project to give SMEs access to the facilities they need, whether it's just synchrotrons, whether it's synchrotrons and life science, whether it's that plus databases, who knows, right? But proper money. We're not talking about 1 to 2 million. I think you're up at the 10 to 20 million to do something serious over a period of 4 or 5 years. Even better would be a FP10 program that lasts over the 7 or 8 years of the entire framework program, providing SMEs with access to the RTIs that they need.
I could not agree more. So I think we've gone through a lot today. We've covered really a lot of stuff from what we have discussed in our event. And this was from the strategic importance of RTIs to the practical steps needed to improve access for SMEs. And I'd like to go around the table for some final thoughts here. And so in one sentence, and I know you love these kind of things, what do you think is the most critical step to improve SMEs' access to RTIs? I mean, this is the conclusion of all the conversations you had today and along the years. In one sentence, what is the most critical thing to improve access of SMEs to RTIs? Andy?
So I think we've seen so far that of the 4 research infrastructures, each has a slightly different industry engagement mechanism, and there's no one size fits all. And therefore, the only constant theme that I can think of is the need to understand industry's needs, because that's really how you develop high quality services. So for me, the single take home that applies to all infrastructures, even if they have slightly different services, is about trying to understand industry needs. That's the key take home, in my opinion.
Nuria, how can we complement that?
Well, I fully agree with what Andy said. And to complement, also, I think that dedicated personnel that are the the bridge with the companies. I
The
thought that
skill.
exactly. Dedicated person is also key for engaging with our companies.
But we spoke about orchestrators. We spoke about all sorts of things.
As well.
What other ideas can we bring to the table in one sentence? And I'm going to go to Claudia now.
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat, but what is really important is, I think, to keep the access routes and the funding for access as flexible and as low barrier as possible. And I actually like very much Ed's idea here of a program that lasts throughout the whole framework program, the whole duration. Because in a way, the member states have already given the mandate to research infrastructures to manage the user access. And often in the context of these funding programs, it seems like they're putting an additional barrier on top, an additional level of regulation, while really we see from examples from the UK, from SME access schemes, that having something simple and easy and straightforward and giving the RTIs the mandate to manage their own industry engagement would be really important. And yeah, I fully support this idea of a framework program lasting before the industry program.
No, absolutely. And I fully support that as well. But if we build upon that or complement the idea, I'm going to ask Ed to finalize this round of critical issues. And what would you highlight?
A provision of full support A to Z. We need to do the whole thing, which means take in hand the problem, be able to provide the access at low or zero cost, and provide the solution in the form of a report or feedback that the company can actually use. Right? I mean, providing a graph or some wacky data that they can't use is no point. It has to be A to Z. And I think that's really where the European funding support has to come in, because for the academics users don't need that kind of support mostly. Now, that's also a changing model that is not something to forget about. But the SMEs, they have no time, they have no money, they don't want to learn how our techniques work, and that's fine. So we need A to Z. Problem, through to access, through to providing the solution, the feedback, the numbers, the pictures that they need for what they're doing in their manufacturing processes or whatever it might be.
Well, again, this is another stepping stone in this long path of building a thriving research and innovation arena in Europe, or area in Europe. So thank you so much to all of you. You have been amazing. I just was a privilege to be here with the five of us together discussing this again. I think our event in June, and I think that is owed to all of you, was a huge success. It's being taken up by the Commission, both at the technology infrastructures level, the research infrastructures level, and hopefully transversally to a lot more programs along the full FP10 with an A to Z tailored solution or funding instrument. So thank you all, and we'll keep in touch and speak soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was
Thank
great
you,
fun.
Ricardo.